Hello and welcome to this Independence Day edition of Catholic Answers Live. Many people getting the holiday today, so if you're joining us over hot dogs and potato salad, congratulations to you. I hope you're enjoying them. Thanks for letting us be part of that. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Two very fine guests with us today, and we're gonna for Independence Day do a little bit of a different show. We're gonna consider America in a moment of crisis, really. I mean, it does strike one as a moment of crisis. As a matter of fact, maybe saying a moment of crisis is too generous. Maybe it's a moment of crises. We'll see what our guests have to say about that. Our guests are, in order of importance, Todd Aglialaro, the head of the Catholic
order.
Amen. Amen to that, by the way.
Hello. Todd is the head of Catholic Answers Press, all these wonderful Catholic Answers books that come out, and booklets and magazines and all these things. Todd runs all of that. Thanks for being with us today, Todd Aglialaro.
Hey, so great to be here.
And also with us, the president of the Universe, Chris Check. Hi, President of the Universe.
How are you, Cy? And I totally agree with you. Anyone, with respect to Todd's importance, anyone who has seen the really dramatic and wonderful growth of Catholic Answers Press over the last decade, all attributed to Todd's hard work. Well,
yeah,
most.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was some authors or something had something to do with that.
By the way, some really great stuff. I see sitting over there, Secrets from Heaven. Father Sebastian Walsh is wonderful. I don't even, exegesis isn't even the right word. What do you call it, Todd?
Well, I mean, you call it popular exegesis.
Yeah.
It's scriptural homiletics.
Yeah, on the parables and the conversations of our Lord. Some really wonderful insights. I'm so happy with that book.
It's a great book.
But we got One Less God Than You is out now. That's a brand new book. I hope that does very well. Really a wonderful kind of response to atheist and agnostic kind of memes, or you would say, or slogans.
Yeah, we're calling them slogans. And what's cool about that book is not just that it tackles those slogans that you come across on social media or from your friends, but it takes a really practical approach. We all know a lot of the arguments that we can marshal against atheism, but this gives you kind of a step-by-step practical approach to it that's super helpful.
I never know the arguments when I need them, though. I'm one of those people. They just escape, so I got to keep reading the books.
Another one, Cy, Mark Brumley, our friend up at Ignatius Press, did a wonderful addition to our 20 Answer series on Catholic social teaching.
Yes, that's Mark is, I thought a lot of light shed in a very small number of words in that little booklet, because that's a topic. People, it's almost like an open free zone. People will attribute everything to Catholic social teaching, without having a genuine understanding of what it is.
Sure.
And particularly that Christ is at the center of it. And I think that it's not a system, it's not here, do what the Catholic Church teaches and the world will be fine, as far as like an economic system or a political system. It's a way of understanding how to live with Christ at the center of it. I thought he got that right on.
Yes.
We better mention Pope Peter too, then, if we're going to mention all these great books. That
Joe Heschmeyer.
Yeah. Joe Heschmeyer's a superstar.
He is.
Fantastic book.
All right. So Todd Aglialaro, the director of Catholic Answers Press, Chris Check, the president of Catholic Answers. I am Cy Kellett, your host. And we're talking about a time of crisis. In the notes that I sent you guys about how I want to talk about this, I wasn't joking when I said, what would Tolkien make of this? Because I know that Todd is a big fan of Tolkien and knows the works of Tolkien and the philosophy of Tolkien. And it seems to me that underneath the worlds that Tolkien builds is a spiritual world, and that's also true of a thing called the real world, and we forget that. It seems like there's an ill spirit at loose in the world right now. And I'll start with you, Todd. I mean, as a Catholic, how am I supposed to understand this times where it actually seems that evil spirits, are at work?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Tolkien. I'm not sure maybe this is the connection you were going for, but in a lot of some of his private letters, you find a theme in which he says something to the effect of, I see all of history as essentially one long decline.
Yeah, defeat. He uses the word defeat. Yeah.
and only to be rescued at the last moment. He coined the phrase the eucatastrophe, this great reversal of ill fortune at the end. And of course, you see that in the plot of The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, or some of the stories in the Silmarillion. And so, and of course, you see that thematically in The Lord of the Rings as well, where you have the elvish kingdoms that are kind of in this perpetual decline, and you have even the kingdoms of men are a shadow of their former glory. And so this is a kind of melancholy, I think, that pervades Tolkien's personality that worked its way into his.
But it's funny because he prefaces that line in that particular letter saying, "I am a Christian and indeed a Roman Catholic." So the only way that I can see history is as a long defeat.
Good point.
And that, and then he does say, in myth and legend, we do get some glimpses of the final victory that we know that is coming. Yeah.
And he never thought to look for it in the temporal. He realized it's only going to come eschatologically.
This is the Christian view.
Yeah.
I mean, the church, the principal evidence, the church has to follow the trajectory of her founder.
Well, if I may, then it seems to me part of the agitated spirit has to do with that we are approaching an election in November, and there's always the summer before that is always a little bit wild in the United States. And this is
unprecedented.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe 1968. I don't know what you.
Yeah.
There won't be conventions at which to have riots this year, but if there could be, there would be one thing.
There are other reasons too. I mean, people have found other reasons to riot. You don't need a convention. So
yeah, but you get the sense that even in Catholic media, I have to say I'm a little I have a little peak at the moment right now, a little annoyance at some of what I'm hearing on Catholic radio, and I want to be very blunt about that we give into a temptation to politicize our time on the radio because we think that the politics of the moment are so dire and so the choices are so stark about our future that's being made. I'm going to go back to Tolkien. It feels a little bit like what we're trying to do is wield the ring. This is not. Putting too much faith in political answers, it seems to me doesn't fit with what you both just described as the Catholic kind of approach to history.
No, and it doesn't accord with the counsel of King David that the staff has heard me quote ad nauseum here. Put not your trust in princes, in the children of men in whom there is no salvation. On the Tolkien thing, I'd like to ask Todd, and related to, I think in answer to a question that you're asking, the frenzy, and it is a frenzy right now, a political frenzy that's manifesting itself several ways, but it is exacerbated by the technology. And what's being tweeted or pinned or faced or whatever it is. I learned last week of a practice that now is so common it has a name. It's funny how in this age of technology, new names for things come up very, very quickly, much more quickly than they used to. But this practice is called doom scrolling, and it's what people do in the 2 hours when they're lying in bed before they go to sleep, just kind of, I don't know, going through the Drudge Report, looking for a hit of adrenaline, or CNN or Fox or whatever it is. And that action is necessarily or will be enervating, and it's not going to give anybody peace. But to Tolkien, Todd, I think I read an interview of Tolkien's one time, or someone had asked him about the Palantir, the sphere in which you could see things, and someone had asked him if this was an allusion to television or a prediction about television or something like that, and he said that it was.
I'm shocked to hear that, actually, because he always resisted any kind
allegory.
of implication that something stood for something else.
Right. Yeah. But nonetheless, there is this. We live in a time when because of information technology, we're seeing things at a speed and rate and volume that we never did before, and that I think is disturbing the peace.
Well, the Palantir became corrupted, so its initial purpose was good and its uses were good, and it was only when Denethor used it to get a kind of a curated negative view of events, which speaks to actually to your analogy very well.
Yeah.
You mean he got CNN on that thing?
I think it was CNNBC.
Sauron was perverting the Palantir's vision to make Denethor despair. And I think we could say that that's a really apt comparison to our news media today. It's filling us with despair because of the distorted view of reality that it's giving us.
Yeah, well said, Todd. And this is a question that I haven't even answered for myself. Is this time as bad as it seems to be? And I think there's a great deal of evidence for that. Or am I believing that it is worse than it is because of the rate and volume of technologically provided news, if that's the word we want to use?
Yeah, while we're riffing on Tolkien a little bit, I also recall a conversation that he had with C.S. Lewis. I think I read about it in the Inklings biography, in which Lewis and Tolkien mused on the question of whether they were required to care about every horrible piece of news they heard about from every corner of the world. And this was the 30s and 40s probably. Right. And imagine how much that's been multiplied today. You mentioned the Drudge Report.
Yeah. I came across a quote from Charles Péguy 2 days ago, and it goes something like this: nothing is as new as Homer, and nothing is as old as today's newspaper. And that would have been 1913, I guess. Or he died at the Marne in 1914 or something. So, yeah.
Well, this sense, however, that you get from TV that everything is spinning out of control does actually make the spirit spin out of control, and then it tends to make us want a kind of an instant or immediate answer. And I think that's part of the draw of politics, is that we think, well, if we could just get enough Supreme Court justices, which that seems to have been blown out of the water in the month of June.
That is a promise that has not delivered.
Yeah, like it seems like constantly a certain pro-life person like myself, we fall for this. If we can just get enough Supreme Court. It's not that the Supreme Court doesn't matter. It clearly does matter. Maybe you could put it in perspective for me, Todd.
Well, not only that it does matter, but it's not a Manichaean decision here. We can look at the failings of the Supreme Court, especially in recent days, and the ways people have let us down.
And by Catholic justices.
But imagine how much worse it might have been, or look at some other rulings that were close.
Right.
So it's not an either or here. It's the turf war is what it is.
Well, maybe I have to take a break, but when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, about how the prudent person gets involved in politics. And we obviously have political obligations. I don't think there's any question about that, but gets involved in politics and does their proper part as the Lord would want, but without making an idol of politics, which I think is the great danger, because then you miss out on the good news entirely. You miss out on the gospel and life with Christ. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and see if our gentleman can answer that question.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
And there is power in prayer, because prayer is more important than breathing. Prayer can change the circumstances you are in. Prayer can change the world. The most important thing you ever do is pray. And so when you pray, God, you can do anything. And I know you love me more than I love me. So God, I'm handing this all over to you. And I know miracles can happen in my life, and they will.
Welcome back to this special edition, this Independence Day edition, even though tomorrow is Independence Day, which, you know, you get the day off today. So we're calling this our Independence Day edition of Catholic Answers Live. It's a tough time in the United States. It's a tough time all around the world for a great variety of reasons. It's looking like it'll be a tough summer and fall for us here in the United States as well, because, of course, it's a political campaign season, and those are difficult in the best of times, and these are not the best of times, nor are we the best of people, probably. So I think it was Hemingway, the times weren't very good and we weren't very good in them. I think that might be a Hemingway quote.
Is that from The Sun Also Rise? Is that one of
I can't remember. It strikes me that Hemingway said something like that. But you could probably count on it.
Was he sober? Was he sober when he said that? Or?
Almost certainly not. Yeah. But well, let's not pick on Ernest Hemingway. We were talking before we went to the break, as we kind of reflect on America in crises at this time, about the allure, the temptation to politicize and just become political creatures and put all of our baskets in, or all of our eggs in the political basket. But then I suppose there is the opposite allure, which is to be so spiritualized or so. Maybe so in despair that we just don't get involved. So Todd, as the balanced person on this panel, how do I balance these things?
We're in trouble.
Psychologically balanced or spiritually? God help us all. Well, I think there's a kind of tension. There's a kind of almost a paradox in the Christian life. And when I reflect on it, I always think back to a line from T.S. Eliot. I think it's from Ash Wednesday, where he says, "Teach us to care and not to care," and that's addressed to God. And this or a novel that both Chris and I count among our favorites, "Death Comes for the Archbishop," when Father Vaillant is going off to Colorado to be a missionary, and the narrator describes him as being torn between the desire to go and the necessity to stay, and both of those kind of poetic lines express for us this tension between heaven and earth, between the realization that there will only be justice and happiness and fulfillment in the hereafter, and yet we have a job to do in this world, and you so there's an extreme to be avoided on either side of being too worldly, which can lead to its own kind of despair, certainly, and to be too spiritual. Is that the way I'd characterize it? I'm not sure, but to care too little about the course of events in the world, which could go on for all we know for 10,000 more years. So we better, do our best.
Well, it's a difficulty for Catholics because if you decide that my focus is exclusively on the hereafter, then there's a kind of temptation, as some have proposed, to sort of withdraw from the world. These the Benedict option, or however it goes. So we are here to leaven the earth.
Well put.
And in fact, we have Bishop Strickland has a book coming out on that with that title in it. Yeah, I think that if we have an active prayer life, an active sacramental life, and we read widely and keep things in perspective, then we will be good citizens. But also, as all of us are here to admit, we know that this is going to pass.
The thing about being leaven, however, it seems to me that the leaven, the way that we are leaven is by actually bringing Christ into very specific practical situations. It's not primarily by grand political acts or theories or movements or that kind of thing. That leaven works, molecule by molecule, so to speak. It works on a very it affects the whole dough, but it does so by each bit of that leaven doing its part where it is. What do you make of that?
I think that what you say is absolutely true, and it reveals itself in the reality that one of the conceits or errors anyway that a lot of what can we say, conservatives, and that could mean a lot of different things, to be sure, make is that if we can just get this number of people in office, or if we can get the right legislation passed, that then we can set this country back on the course that it should be on, whatever that might be. What the difficulty there is that necessary to a free society, or necessary to civilization, are certain institutions that precede political life, or they are political in the sense that Aristotle would use the word. So marriage, for example, and the household and the family. And when these, or the institutions of education, or even the institutions of popular culture, if people are watching good films and reading good books and reading good poems, their hearts are going to be formed. And without these cultural institutions or foundations, no amount of Defense of Marriage Act, for example, is going to restore the culture.
No, that's a really good point. And I write about something like this in my book on marriage, that that marriage and family are pre-political, and they're natural human institutions.
Oh, as Chesterton says, they pre-exist the state.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I probably plagiarized that from him subconsciously, but and it leads to some really bitter ironies. So when the fight over the legalization of same-sex marriage was going on, I had a lot of libertarian friends, even Catholic libertarian friends, who said, well, we can't let the government tell you who you can love. And they saw it perversely as a blow for freedom and a blow against state control, to let the state redefine a pre-political institution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've seen now that the libertarian argument, or if maybe there's more than one, has kind of collapsed on its own contradictions.
I mean, it has some appeal maybe in some other quarters, and if you the more you depoliticize things, the more you keep the state out of human institutions where it doesn't belong, the more freedom of movement you have in theory. But when you misapply that principle, you do a lot of damage.
Sure.
So we have the book, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist, from Trent, and in which he does a good job of explaining why you can't. But I wonder if there's anyone making the argument or asking the question, can a Catholic be a libertarian? Because I do think that libertarian tendency, really as a reaction to the overweening state. I mean, the invasive, obnoxious state that has been born in the post-war era in the United States. It's gaining traction. There are many, many people who will say, sure, being libertarian is completely consistent with my Catholic faith. I think that they are mistaken. I wonder, is there anyone... well, first of all, am I mistaken? And is there anyone making that argument? Because I'm sorry to make this question so long, Todd, and I'm going to leave it for you. But it seems to me that Judge Gorsuch exemplified this in his decision on the extension of the idea of sex discrimination going out to the farthest reaches of the transgender idea, is that Judge Gorsuch is a good man and a good judge in a lot of ways, but he's a libertarian and therefore not able to apply a moral standard in the application of the law. As a matter of fact, I think he would say the law is amoral, which is I don't know that he would say that, but that's certainly the impression you get from that decision. So, and I think there are many people, Catholics, who would say, yeah, let's do that. Let's have a place where the law is not a moral thing. We just all work it out amongst ourselves.
Well, you're almost talking about classical liberalism more than libertarianism. Of course, there's a lot of close connections there. and you're putting on the table now the whole American experiment, aren't you? I mean, this is a huge question.
It wasn't an experiment. It was some people who came across the ocean for different reasons.
Well, there are certainly elements of experimentation.
But I think when it comes to libertarianism, strictly speaking, I don't pretend to be able to parse out every difference. But it's funny because you look at something like the Benedict option, which Chris brought up, and sometimes the Benedict option is kind of like the new evangelization or some other concept.
Right. It means a lot of different things. Yeah. I'm not even sure that whoever coined it.
But I knows what it's Rod Dreher.
Yeah. Right. No, but it knows what it means.
Or the Ben op, if you want to be hip.
Oh, right.
But I think its defenders would at least say it's communitarian. It's not individualistic. It's communitarian, and they would
God bless them for
distinguish. But it's funny. Oh, I'm hearing some music.
There's so many interruptions. We never let Todd make his point.
Don't let me forget my thought.
We're going to get the point. The question has to do with we know you can't be a socialist and be a Catholic, but can you be a modern libertarian or even classical liberal and be a Catholic? Was that a fair summary of the question that's on the table? All right, right back to Settle That with Todd Aglialaro.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Why is it wrong to help someone commit suicide? Don't people have a right to die with dignity rather than being a burden to others? Does the Church teach that the terminally ill must be kept alive by machines for as long as possible? In 20 Answers, End-of-Life Issues, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you unravel the controversies and confusions surrounding euthanasia, assisted suicide, and the rights of patients in our uncertain healthcare future. 20 Answers, End-of-Life Issues is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the Church instead. But we should embrace sacred scripture, not just as the revealed Word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the Church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible as a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the Church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible as a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible as a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team talks about what Mondays mean to Catholics.
Monday morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Independence Day edition of Catholic Answers Live. We're having a panel conversation about America in crises. We have a whole set of crises we're currently facing, and we'll probably inflict some more on ourselves before November comes. At least it seems likely. We seem almost addicted to them.
Our best wounds are the self-inflicted ones.
Yeah, we're
good at it.
We're getting very good at it. When we left for the break, the onus was on Todd Aglialaro, the director of Catholic Answers Publishing, and we're asking about kind of this libertarian tendency as probably as a corrective to a state that has been out of control for a long time. The idea that we just let everybody do what they want to do, kind of thing. And is that an answer that a Catholic can settle for, Todd?
Well, and I was building up to what really is a small point, but I was thinking back to 2016 when you had Bernie Sanders supporters and you had Donald Trump supporters, and it became fashionable in some circles to point out that they actually wanted a lot of the same things. And
economic protection for manufacturing, fewer stupid foreign wars.
And in their populist approach, there was a lot of similarities. And maybe I'm being too clever, but it seems to me there's a little bit of that to be found in at least the stated desires of Catholic libertarians, and they do exist. And the Benedict option people, I had mentioned they consider themselves communitarian, which would seem to be the antithesis of the libertarian ethos. But I think if you got them in a room together, they would both express a shared desire for a smaller, family-oriented living, for a relief from the overarching boot of the state. And I think they probably find more to agree about, at least in practice, than to disagree about. So you have some funny bedfellows, and sometimes when you follow one idea around full circle, you reach its opposite.
So I think in American history we can actually point to parts or times when when Catholic social ideas, Catholic social teaching has accorded with what Todd called the American experiment. I wouldn't use that word. I would just say that different people moved here for different reasons and then agreed on a form of government. But it was limited and it was federal. And of course, when people hear that word nowadays, they think a strong central government. Well, in fact, what it meant was independent sovereign states forming a league or fedus. And
it's a word like inflammable. It means both things.
Yeah. And then, but really, what it meant was a limited central government and decentralized and sovereign states. Now, after the war between the states, we tended to get away from that model. But that kind of Jeffersonian federalism has a harmony with the Catholic principle of subsidiarity, where authority starts with the family and comes out from the family, rather than at the central government and comes down. And so you're right. When I was at Rockford Institute, we used to get together with the libertarians once a year for a meeting of the John Randolph Club, and we had quite a bit in common. It's when they started talking about strange solutions to the abortion question that you realize that, there's a limit to this alliance.
Yeah, subsidiarity is the word. I think you put your finger right on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, again, you can find out about subsidiarity in the book on Catholic social teaching that Mark Brumley just did. He put it in the proper perspective, I think. But it's something Mark Brumley is very good at, perspective. Okay, so... if you here, we're talking about the current crises. Both of you, without me prompting you, end up talking about marriage a lot, and it seems to me we've completely lost the battle on marriage. We have the broad acceptance of divorce as a cure for marriage. We have a broad acceptance of things that are not marriage being called marriage and being accorded the respect of marriage. We have courts constantly now. Well, I'll just tell you this. I have a friend who's a family lawyer, has been for, 25 years in Massachusetts, a family court lawyer. And he says with decisions like the Obergefell decision, he said what people don't see is that those empower judges to get more and more involved in the minutia of family life, because the judges become convinced that family life is a thing that's defined by the state. And so they give themselves permission, instead of going, I don't know, as a judge, I can't solve that stays in the family, figure that out. The judges become more and more these minute kind of managers of family life. I think this is happening all around the country because we've decided that family is a thing that the state establishes and defines. Marriage is a thing that the state established and defines. It is not a thing that the state protects and has a stewardship over. So as much, there's no sense of stewardship because we're not stewards. We're owners.
That's an excellent distinction.
So I'm just putting my despair out on you because you both say, well, how important marriage and family is to the Catholic way of addressing the crises, but we've destroyed it.
Marriages and families are the great rival to the state. And the
well put, Todd.
Subordination of marriage and family is a core principle of socialism, at least in practice. You mentioned Trent's book, and the reinvention of family to make it subordinate to the state's interests We see that throughout the history of communism in Europe and in China, and we see that ideology in socialist groups at work today.
The church has quit the field, I'm afraid, on this question in the main, on the divorce question. Now, sure, we know what the church is teaching on divorce is, and we tell it here on Catholic Answers Live. But go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wonder if we do, because divorce is a very serious sin against the common good. And do we say that? How often do we say that? Mostly we end up with people who are divorced, often not by a choice of their own. They've been abandoned by the other spouse, and we end up comforting them. But where are we really saying the harsh truth about divorce, that it's a sin against the common good to be avoided, with heroic effort, if possible?
Yeah, it's a harsh truth, but it's based on a great and wonderful truth about the nature of marriage. And so it's really edifying when you do have that said. And my good friend Layla Miller, who's the co-author with Trent Horn of our book Made This Way, is a real crusader on this point, and sometimes with very little support in Catholic circles that she should be getting. But it's the flip side of the glorious thing that marriage is, and it's not simply divorce and remarriage and the subsequent commission of adultery that makes it a problem. It's something that does violence to the divine typology and symbolism of marriage,
and one of the
and to children.
Yes,
too,
and one of the proximate causes of divorce is another topic on which the church has largely quit the field, and that's contraception. These two things. Now, sure, there are political decisions involving both of them, but the natural law realities surrounding contraception and divorce come before the law, because that has come before the human positive law.
That's right. And then, but now we come around to where people say, well, it's that you Catholics and your pelvic issues again. But these are not merely pelvic issues. The society is structured on the relationship between men and women, on marriage, and on family. These are the basic units of the structure of society. The society is not structured on courthouses and congresses and presidencies.
Yeah, and you say you Catholics.
That is not the
I apologize.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
You know what it is? I'm looking at you on the
please.
screen. There's a little bit of a lag in your mouth, so I thought you had stopped talking.
No, that's actually how I talk. The sound comes out a few seconds after.
When you say you Catholics and your pelvic issues, that kind of charge comes not just from the world, but unfortunately from our Christian brothers.
Yes.
In our separated brethren. And whereas we have been pretty united with faithful evangelicals and other kinds of Christians on abortion, there's not nearly been as much unity on marriage, and certainly not on contraception. And Chris's point about the natural law is significant, because I think we find in evangelicalism and in Protestantism too often a kind of divine positivism when it comes to morality.
Yes.
And they've lost hold of the natural law tradition. And so if they say, well, where in the Bible does it say you can't do this? Now, of course, it does say pretty explicitly in the Bible that, Jesus is pretty clear about divorce. And yet Protestantism, can I say the Protestant experiment? No, I won't say that again. The Reformation was founded. Of course, you had the Continental Reformation, but a lot of people believe it wouldn't have succeeded had it not been for what happened in England with Henry VIII. So really, divorce is what kicked off this whole separation.
And Martin Luther's desire to be married.
Sure.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. So it's at the very roots.
A nun.
And it divided Christendom's energies on these, and we're seeing the ill fruits of that now.
The Catholic faith is a holistic thing. I guess that's part of what Catholic means. And go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm really glad you said that, and one of you can correct me, but I think it's is it Justin Martyr in his correspondence with the Emperor, and he makes the point that if something is true, well, then it belongs to the Catholic Church. It belongs to us. Now, we may not have exactly at this point have fit all the pieces together. But if it's true, it belongs to the Catholic Church, and that's why and because of that, and apropos of our conversation, I'm intrigued by the work of what we're calling now, I guess, the Catholic integralists, who very much want political life, active political life in the United States to be informed by the natural law and the moral teachings of the Catholic Church. Now, the likelihood of their success, we can certainly debate.
Yeah, it's like a notch below distributism, I think.
Yeah, perhaps so. And then George Weigel, of course, poo-pooed him in First Things, and he said, well, it would be nice if one of these, young guys had ever run for dog catcher or something like that, in his typically dismissive way. But nonetheless, if something is true, then it belongs to the Catholic Church. And this, and you say holistic, you're right, Si. And then this applies, of course, to political life.
By the way, we have to take a break. We're going to come back. We're talking about the current crises, and I guess as Catholics, if you're going to talk about a society in a state of crisis, this is what's going to happen. You are going to end up talking about marriage and family life, because the health of society depends on the health of marriage and family life. And if you're going to try to pinpoint where the origins of crises are, you're going to have to go back to what is happening in the home. If you want one of the best books, as a matter of fact, it may be the best book you can get to get a concise explanation of the Catholic teaching on sex, life, love. You can get a book called Inseparable from Catholic Answers Press. Inseparable, 5 perspectives on sex, life, and love in defense of Humanae Vitae. It came out, I believe, the same summer as the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae. The stuff in there, I think, will give you a deeper. If you're listening to us saying, what do the Catholics? What is their point about this? What do they mean when this is holistic? Well, if you want to get 5 different perspectives that go from the perspective of the husband and wife to the larger societal perspectives, the cosmic perspectives of marriage, you can get it in Inseparable, 5 perspectives on sex, life, and love in defense of Humanae Vitae. It's only $10. You can get it for $10, have it sent to your house at shop.catholic.com. We'll be right back.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
The Church has 2,000 years of wisdom to share on what it takes to live life gracefully.
We're so overwhelmed by how much our faith has transformed our marriage and family especially. We want everyone to experience the incredible gift that the Catholic vision of life and love really is.
More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak. Tomorrow morning, 10 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're talking about American crisis today as we celebrate the Independence Day, which kind of stands as the proxy for all of the founding of our country. I suppose we have one other day, Thanksgiving Day, where we remember those first pilgrims, those crazy pilgrims. They were wild people. We're not going to get into it, Chris, about how crazy they were.
So I just want to
go ahead.
I just want to thank you for saying Independence Day and not 4th of July.
Well, there's 2 reasons for that. One is it's only the 3rd of July today, and so we're commemorating Independence Day. The other is I know you will fire me if I say 4th of July, because there's this European tendency to make a date the thing.
Yeah.
Like May Day.
And typically it's revolutionary. Yeah.
Right.
And
it's
then
a revolutionary.
And then you see all the major boulevards in, Rome, for example, 23 November or September, or something bad happened in the Risorgimento against the church, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and I know that we could probably have a debate here among ourselves about whether there even was a revolution in the United States.
It was an act of secession.
I'm not asking you to answer me. I'm just saying we could debate this. Currently, I am of the mind. This is where I'm currently feeling on what Todd called the American experiment. Bravely, in your presence, referred to it as the American experiment, knowing your antipathy to that term, but I kind of agree with Todd to some degree. No, I'm just gonna. I don't want to get fired with him, but I am of a mind now. If we could just have Queen Elizabeth back as the actual direct monarch of the country, I think we'd all be doing better than we're doing. She's not a bad person, Queen Elizabeth.
No, she's wise. Yeah,
do you ever listen to her Christmas message? She's a Christian.
Father Hugh is a great admirer of hers.
Well, I think she's an actual Christian. Like you can't really say that about English kings or queens very often. I mean, occasionally, you get Edward the Confessor,
right?
That and then you get Queen Elizabeth. Those are the two. I think she's a real Christian. Okay, so we've. I'm glad we took I won't call it a discursus, but we took a little trip into the Catholic teaching on the fundamental position of marriage and family life. And you are going to be a society in perpetual crisis if you don't at least approximately get right what a family is. I don't know that. I mean, I truly believe we've lost that. I mean, President Trump is very popular among pro-life people, and I completely understand why. But he wages no battle at all in defense of the natural family, none at all. He has utterly abandoned the field on that. He's not interested in it. As a matter of fact, I would assume he probably has a libertarian attitude about it himself. It seems like we make our voting decisions now based not on who best promotes the common good. And I don't mean this to insult politicians. I really don't. I just feel like we're left with a position because of the current state of our politics where we're actually just trying to avoid as much catastrophe as we can. Who's least likely to bring the most catastrophe? Is that just too despairing a way of thinking about American politics right now?
Well, from our perspective, so many of these battles are rearguard actions now. It's easy to fall into that way of thinking. And I don't completely dismiss a principled choose your battle kind of triage approach to the culture wars, if that's what it takes. There may be other approaches, but I wouldn't disparage someone who made that principled decision.
I see what you're saying.
I agree with what Todd said there.
So it may be that, or it may be a lack of courage. So you never know in any given case, but for some it's not.
But your choice of the word triage suggests that you agree with me that because that's what triage is. You're trying to
save a human life. Yes,
you're trying to save. No, but in some cases you're specifically
pick which
not
life
treating.
Pick which life to save. Right.
Because they're dead.
Yeah.
Because that one's dead. If I spend the next 8 hours operating on that guy, there's 20 others who are going to die instead. Let me save the 20 by triaging that one out.
Right.
So you're saying the family issue is dead. Move on to things that you can save.
Well, the family issue has a number of parts, and I think some of those parts, for example, the definition of marriage, may be dead by now. I don't know of any political will to go back and reverse Obergefell.
I mean, this is the point. Politically, it is dead, but in terms of salvation history, it's not. And it may be. I was telling Todd the other day that I came across a line from Hilaire Belloc, where he says you can turn the son of a farmer into a college student in one semester, but it takes 3 generations to turn a college student into a farmer. In any case, glib, right? But it's going to be several generations before something like marriage comes back, I think, or maybe even more. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be holding the candle, and we keep that candle aflame. Catholics do that. Catholic Answers does it. The church should do it, and then somebody's going to touch it to the bonfire, and then it'll come back.
Let me give an alternate possibility. That America just simply loses its position of leadership in the world, and it's taken up by African countries, or it's taken up by
Eastern
Asian
European countries.
Yeah,
who become who have not abandoned common sense, And so, I mean, to me, it seems much more likely that China would be swept by conversions to Christian faith than that the United States will come back to a position of moral sanity. I actually think that. If you say, well, it's salvation history we're worried about, it seems to be more likely that the Chinese are going to get it right than we are.
Wow,
at this point.
Those are long odds on both of those. So I'm not sure.
Well, the Africans go to Africa then.
No, I think Todd's mention of Hungary,
Poland, and even now Russia, which just ratified its constitution so that they won't have same-sex marriage. It's
Can I say that's part of why this constant media campaign against Russia, because it's
and
still
Hungary
Christians
and
in
Poland,
Russia. Yeah. I mean, I'm not. I don't want. I want to say that in a non-political way, but you have a massive Orthodox Christian country that has not lost its moral compass in the way that the West has, and we constantly abuse them in our press. Do you think those two things are a coincidence? I do not.
No, they're by design.
And you get back so if we can connect, maybe we were talking about the Reformation earlier, and which was another kind of experiment, I guess, and the principle of private interpretation, the enshrinement of the individual as the arbiter of right and wrong, made so it's possible that America, which in some respects is still a Christian beacon compared to a lot of corrupted Western Europe, and I think there's still a momentum there. We have a lot of we have a lot of faithful Catholics who aren't burdened by a lot of the interference of the state in the faith that you saw in Europe,
right?
And we have a lot of momentum from a lot of faithful evangelical Christians too, who kind of keep the flame going. But at the same time, you get the sense that maybe when we do fall, we'll fall even harder because of the commitment we've made to individual interpretation of morality. It's kind of there in the very bones of American Protestantism. And if you want, I don't want to sound like an integralist because I'm not, and I don't want to sound anti-American because I'm not either. I'm probably more favorable towards American liberalism than Chris is. But at the same time, I have to recognize the weakness there, and maybe it takes a country where they've got a longer cultural memory of the faith, where the embers are starting to glow hotter, like in a Poland or a Hungary, or even a country that was a great oppressor like Russia. Not so sure about China, though. We'll have to talk about that one later.
I don't know. I think China is a natural fit for Christianity because of its Confucian history. I think it's too bad what's happened in China. It seems to me the communists are actually a tremendous interruption to Chinese history instead of I don't see how communism, or what is now really a kind of pseudo-communist fascism in China, I just don't think it can last. I think they'll remember their Confucian past at some point.
Well, a nation that deliberately kills its own children can't last. That's for sure.
Which nation are you speaking of now?
China.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
is that the only one that strikes you as
yeah.
having that problem?
No. Well, I told you it was long odds for both. So
okay, fair enough.
Whereas in Hungary now they have policies that encourage childbearing. Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of European countries are instituting pronatal tax policies and things, but Eastern European Christian countries in particular are being aggressive with that.
Now the demographic winter is well in. It may be too late, but I mean, doesn't mean that. I mean, the lost causes are the best ones. So.
All right. Well, I think we're heading towards the end of this hour, and there are more crises to cover in the second hour. I do want to. We've a whole bunch more to cover. I didn't mean to get into guess which country is going to be the most Christian 100 years from now, but I'm going to go with Nigeria. If we're betting, I'll go with Nigeria. Okay, so let's talk next hour about some positive program going forward. There are more issues. Well, go ahead.
This hour has not been positive.
It feels a little bit. Well, yeah, it's been a little bit of a downer. I'm just going to go with that. But I do also want to get to earlier. We had a historian on Catholic Answers Live earlier in the month of June who compared our current state to the French Revolution. I want to ask you about the French Revolution and How does a Catholic respond if you wake up one day and you're in the middle of the French Revolution? That'll be the question we'll start with next hour. Todd Aglialaro, one of our guests. Todd is Director of Publishing here at Catholic Answers. Chris Check, our other guest, he is the President of Catholic Answers. I am Cy Kellett, your host. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of our Independence Day discussion on America in Crisis. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Joined in studio with us today are Todd Aglialaro, the Director of Publishing at Catholic Answers, and Chris Check, the President of Catholic Answers, both of whom are able to pronounce the name of Charles Péguy and sound French doing it. Chris because he can imitate Pepe Le Pew, and Todd because he speaks French.
Peter Sellers.
Oh, Peter!
I got all my French from Inspector Clouseau.
Oh, one of the greats, Peter Sellers. We're talking this. We're taking this Independence Day holiday as an opportunity to talk about the state of our country right now, and its various crises, and try to do so from a Catholic perspective, and maybe shed some light on ways forward from this. I mean, to some degree, I suppose, and I'll get both of your take on this. When things get really hot, you just got to let them burn out. I mean, that is part of a life of a society. Sometimes people start burning stuff down and tearing stuff down. You just got to wait till they get over it, because they will get over it. No, nobody agrees with me. Okay.
Or someone like Napoleon steps in and puts an end to it.
I got you.
Oh yeah, we were going to talk about the revolution.
Right. It has a. Do you think it's
or Franco? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's overly dramatic to be comparing the current state of America to the French Revolution?
No.
Oh.
No, there's a lot of differences certainly, but the
principles that are informing the crises are very similar.
Well, they're anti-theistic
ideas, yeah.
Yeah, but in place of instead of a goddess of reason to worship, we have the goddess of wokeness or something now to worship.
Well, divorce was the new sacrament in the Revolution. I mean, so they celebrated divorces. Yeah, there was a whole a rite of divorce that evolved during the Revolution.
Well, you see, so if we're talking about the unrest in the streets, or are we talking about the decline of marriage, or with regard to the revolution?
I think they're bound up in each other.
But certainly the French are better at unrest in the streets than we are. I mean,
they have a lot more practice at it. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost seasonal with them.
I had a friend who went to his reward a year or two ago, Claude Paulin. He taught at the Sorbonne. He was a philosopher, but his specialty was terror and the reign of terror in particular. And he shared with me accounts of ordinary men and women, a baker, for example, who in his correspondence describing his day, going into the central square, sitting up by the guillotine, watching 100 or so heads come off, getting the blood sprinkled on him, and writing about this, and I think this was a very good thing that I did, and this was my participation in the revolution. Oh, very calmly, in fact, describing this activity.
We're doing these executions digitally now, so that you get people who if you get even a snippet of a grainy video of the person doing something that looks unwoke, then other people go on the internet and promote that as this. I mean, I guess the example, the par excellence of this, is those boys who were at the pro-life rally a few years ago, and then CNN, within a few hours of some video that was very deceptive, being put on the internet, it gets sent all around. These videos of what looks like racist behavior from these boys, but was not in fact racist behavior from these boys. That is the fact of the matter. They were not behaving in any way other than a respectful manner, and it was totally distorted. And then it gets on CNN, and then it gets all over. And now suddenly, the person there's a kind of digital execution.
Well, it almost seems quaint to recall that.
Yeah, can we bring back Covington, Kentucky,
right.
please?
It seems like a relic of a gentler age when we didn't
horrible to
burn
think
down
of,
people's houses for doing that sort of thing, or
yeah,
or assault you on the street.
Well, what we are starting to see is the guillotine claiming Robespierre. So I don't know who the latest one is. Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, I don't know how many billions this guy has, and my heart doesn't break for him that he lost, $8 billion in advertising or something. But when the revolutionaries start to eat their own,
they eat their own.
They eat their own, as Ben and Jerry's is doing, or Honda Motor Corporation, or Coca-Cola, or whomever it is, and then, or in fact, this couple from St. Louis, who defended their homes with firearms when the mob came in, broke down the gate. This man is a liberal. He is a liberal civil rights lawyer.
Civil rights lawyer, yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Well, okay, so let me get to that idea of liberalism, because it's a very complex history of a relationship between the Catholic Church and liberalism in the United States. There's a certain time in which the joke was made that the definition for when the Catholic bishops would meet was the Democratic Party at prayer. You remember that?
Yeah, that's a joke about the USCCB. It still is sometimes.
Yeah. So it's probably less true now, though, because I think there's a sense of disillusionment among many with the Democratic Party and with American liberalism in general, because things that are important to Catholics, like not killing babies, they failed us on, and so. The question, I suppose, that's raging in Catholic intellectual circles is, well, was that ever a good alliance? The alliance between American Catholicism and American liberalism, should we have been more cautious? Now it seems like there's a growing sense of a lot of Catholics who are pro-life in particular adopting the entire kind of agenda of the conservative side. Thinking, well, this will be our alliance now. I know I was heading towards a question, and now I forgot the question as I'm going. Somebody help me.
I think these categories are increasingly difficult to use.
They're super fluid, and I was just thinking about 4 different distinctions already.
Yeah,
just in the word
people
liberal.
ask me my politics, and I say I'm a Catholic. Because as Todd pointed out in the previous hour, there's classical liberalism, and there's the kind of revolutionary leftism that we tend to associate with the 60s.
And there's FDR liberalism,
right?
Which has kind of wholesome quality to it, and that I think was more consonant with the faith. And then there's a kind of super destructive modern progressivist liberalism that's quite radical in its aims. And so you really got to be careful to define your terms in any conversation.
But it seems to me the liberals of a certain era, say the liberals of the 1950s, would have been defenders of free speech, whereas the radicals of today are the very ones who are attacking free speech.
Yeah, I think of that great now deceased lion of the left, Nat Hentoff, who was he was
pro-life.
He was a pro-life writer, Jewish atheist pro-life writer for the Village Voice, which is
I remember him. Yeah,
the house organ of liberalism, or was. It doesn't exist anymore. But he was a stalwart to his last breath of that quite laudable old school liberalism that really did value freedom of expression, that really did value diversity, not in the qualified way that they use it today, but in an honest way. And there's precious few of those around these days, it seems.
I could see earlier someone like William Jennings Bryan, maybe, that you could potentially describe as a liberal. Some of his economic policies having
protectionist.
Yeah, but sort of consonant with the church's desire to provide a living wage for the laborer.
But this current kind of censorship is
believe,
not a liberal quality.
I can't believe I haven't heard a Catholic prelate make the argument convincingly that any association with with the institutionalized left today makes sense in terms of the Catholic Church. It doesn't make sense.
Because of the marriage and abortion and
sure,
the sexual revolution,
sex identity. I'd say that's largely at the heart of it. Yeah,
it's almost. I would almost want to make a broad, sweeping statement that the sexual revolution ruined American liberalism.
Yeah, well, you know who develops that thesis very, very well is an old friend of mine, an author named David Carlin, who is still alive, but was a New England Democratic politician for many years. He was a state senator in Rhode Island, and one of these blue dog Democrats of yore, who was very socially conservative, but believed in unions and believed in economic policy that put the market second after people, or at least that's the way it was phrased. And he writes very eloquently in a book that I edited years ago that Sophia Institute Press publishes, that the Democratic Party left him when it became the party of what he calls moral liberalism, and it started with abortion, and it started with the defenestration of every pro-life Democrat, at least on the national level. There may still be a Democratic state congressman or dog catcher or something these days, but they made a decision as a platform point to utterly reject diversity on this question.
When I was living in Illinois, I think you might have been there at the same time. There was a guy who ran for governor, Glenn Thoreau.
A Democrat. I voted for him. Yeah,
so did I. He was pro-gun, pro-life, and he opposed the teachers' union.
Well, but I do think this gets us closer to kind of a look at the roots of the current crisis. Is that there was a liberalism in the United States that was not fanatical about the sexual revolution. And so it was able to be allied with institutions like the Catholic Church, and not just the Catholic Church, but other institutions that were that don't just want to throw out traditions and be revolutionaries all the time. So there was a time when American liberalism was a comfortable ally, never a perfect ally. You wouldn't want to say that, but a comfortable ally for American Catholics. Then the sexual revolution. And it seems to me that we're getting closer to crisis when we start pointing to the sexual revolution, because the sexual revolution is about disconnecting ourselves from nature and doing what we want to do. The enemy is not really God. It's not the church. The enemy of the sexual revolution is nature.
The enemy is ultimately God, I think, Si. I think back to the English Cardinal Manning, a late 19th, early 20th century Cardinal Manning, who had a maxim that all human conflict is ultimately theological. And it sounds slightly glib, but when you reflect on it, it's not. And I think to return to the revolution as an analog here, they had to not merely do away with the monarchy and loosen up some of the institutions, but they had to completely sever themselves from France's Catholic past. They had to replace the Blessed Mother with goddesses. They had to replace feast days with new holidays of the revolution, and so on. And that same spirit of self-determination, of radical self-determination, of self-invention, is rampant in the sexual revolutionary ideology too.
Here, by the way, we see we were talking about parallels at the beginning of the hour between the revolution and France.
It goes back to Genesis 3. By the way, everything does, of course. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but ye shall be like gods.
Yeah.
That is the constitution for the whole project, whether it's the sexual revolution or the French.
Yeah.
Well said. I think Todd put his finger on it. Chris, I'm sorry that I have to take a break.
Go right ahead.
But I like when we find God telling us right from the beginning with in as you said, the third chapter of the book of Genesis, and you could go all the way up through the Tower of Babel. This idea of desiring to be our own gods is at the root of this. Let's take a break, and we'll continue that conversation when we come back.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Si. You really should be listening to our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus. This week, we have an interview with the Archbishop of San Francisco about the destruction of statues, particularly statues of St. Junipero Serra, the father of the state of California. And then we have Carlo Broussard on. He shows how modern claims that the Bible teaches sola scriptura are rooted in false interpretations of a few scriptural passages. Catholic Answers Focus, the best podcast in the world. Get it where you get your podcasts, or find out more at CatholicAnswersFocus.com. The claim to be the best podcast in the world has not been scientifically verified and is probably just bragging. CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio with Matthew Bunson. Join us every week as we talk with the Register's expert writers and editors about the news you need to know and offer authentic Catholic insights on the important stories that impact your life. Register Radio, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, here on EWTN Global Catholic Radio.
Todd Aglialaro, the director of publishing at Catholic Answers, gets the prize for getting us right to the nub of the issue. That if we really want to get to the root of our current crises, it is replacing God with ourselves. That's the constant human temptation, and it is the temptation we are surrendering to as a nation at the moment. Without question, there is the desire that we be gods. That we get to say, "Look, I determine what my sex is. My Creator does not determine what my sex is. I determine what reality is." Patient investigation of the truth has nothing to do with it. I'll go so far as to say you see some of these acts of what are clearly a police officer resorting to brutality. And which happens. I don't mean that as an indictment of the police. I'm just admission of reality. That happens. And then you hear a prosecutor say something like, well, we're going to thoroughly investigate this, and then we'll be bringing charges where appropriate. And that is not acceptable to the mob. The mob says, no, we don't want a thorough investigation. We're not after the truth, in other words. We're after the neck of the person who did this. Yeah. And it's a very dangerous temperament that we're adopting as, in some ways, the recommended temperament for the moment. And it is, once again, we're making ourselves gods. We don't need to do patient investigation as to what is true or false. What we need is violent assertion of what we demand, whether it's a demand to define our own identity, or it's a demand that certain neck goes in the noose. It's the same desire underneath all of it, that we make ourselves gods. Go ahead, Chris. I do have a question that I'm getting to, but go ahead, Chris.
Desire is the word, because in Rousseau we find, because I desire something, then I have a right to it.
Yeah,
that sounds like Nietzsche almost.
Yeah, and there is this. Okay, so here's my point. I remember what the question was I was going to get to. I'm not trying to promote liberalism or conservatism. As a matter of fact, I think that's a grave sin that sometimes happens in Catholic media, that we identify ourselves with a particular political regime rather than staying aloof of those things and allowing intelligent people to hear the moral arguments and make their own decision. If you're a liberal and you're a Catholic who loves the poor and celebrates the sacraments, and you're just as much my brother or sister as if you're a conservative and you do those things. I have no interest in that. But I do think this is where the question that I was trying to get at before. There was a time when it's perfectly, and today I think still, there's a respectable liberalism, there's a respectable conservatism. You could be a Catholic and go into one of those. You can't be a Catholic, I think, and have on the mind of Christ and be one of the revolutionaries of the current moment. That's what I was trying to get to, and ask you if you would agree with that thesis.
I totally agree. I pray a lot of clergy hear you saying that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the impulse to sever the past, to sever ourselves from the past, and is found in this new iconoclasm that we have now. To get back, perhaps for the last time, to the French Revolution, it's not merely a convenient object of inchoate rage. There's something very very purposeful and I think diabolic about not to say that there are some symbols of the past that are not worth revisiting in a rational way. I think there certainly are, and I think some people are doing that, but it's clearly gone well beyond that.
Well, we had the Archbishop of San Francisco on our Focus episode the other day to defend Father Serra, but another place where it's not this people. I want to say use the word literally. I know you're not supposed to use the word, but people literally said to me this. They said it's not about who he was; it's about what he represents, and I think that's wrong because he's an actual person, and just saying, well, we're going to tear down the statues because of what he represents. That's again, that's a commitment to being disconnected from reality.
Cy, can I just say I'm actually in favor of keeping Serra's statues up because of what he represents. Because this is what he represents. Now, first of all, if all Serra had done was bring viticulture, the wheel, forging of metallurgy, rotation of crops, polyphony, monogamy. If that was all he had done, the concept of private property, which is something that the mission system introduced now more successfully, perhaps in South America than in California, because we're at the end of the Spanish Empire by this point. And then the Mexicans come in and enrich their cronies at the end of it. But nonetheless, if that's all that he had done, then a written language, then he would be worthy of 1,000 statues. But Serra does represent something and brought something, this thing that he represents, and that is salvation. He brought baptism to a heathen people living in darkness. Now, I can get away with saying that, I guess, on Catholic Answers Live, right, in front of a sympathetic audience. But what would happen if, for example, in the subsequent debates in the State House about whether we're going to take down his statue as one of the two representing California in the Capitol Rotunda, if someone stands up and says he brought salvation to a heathen people living in darkness, because that's what Serra brought. But I'm only able to have this conversation with the two of you because we accept that salvation is a good
value.
Yeah, is a good thing, right? Actually, the good thing.
Right. Yeah, and here we get back to the principle that it's ultimately theological. And I think maybe some of these protesters are speaking more truth than they realize, at least intentionally. That and I think this is reflected in the nature of some of the graffiti and some of the desecration that you're seeing of these statues, which don't merely reference what they want to do to the cops or something like that, or justice for the oppressed, but blasphemous things and references to God, references to the Bible, references to the church. So, some of them, whether it's deep within them subliminally or quite intentionally, do understand that they're not merely when they say what they symbolize or what they stood for, not merely referring to what they imagine to be colonialism or that they brought disease, but they brought this thing called Christianity, which is this guilt-laden, oppressive religion that took them away from their superior, romanticized paganism that they imagined to be preferable. And so I think maybe I may be projecting here a little bit, but it's
I don't think you are.
It makes sense, I think.
No, I can tell you that you are not. How can I say? Just in work that I've done here in San Diego with the Mission Trails Regional Park, which is the 8,000 acre park here, initially inhabited by the Cumier before Serra got here. That absolutely is the narrative, that there was this sort of bucolic, peaceful people that who weren't sufficiently careful about their immigration policy, and
they should have had a wall.
Yeah, right. And Serra and his Spanish allies came and destroyed that. Now,
well, some of the Spanish allies, I mean, they weren't allies of, but the Spanish and Mexican authorities did in fact attack the Indians in many cases.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to elide that. I want to be careful about that.
This is
mostly for economic gain. This was not the priests who did this. This is the wealthy kind of exploiters.
You're absolutely right, Cy. Or something worse than economic gain, the satisfaction of base,
carnal desire.
Base predatory desires. Right, sure. But nonetheless, it's a thought crime now to say that bringing salvation to a people who previously did not have it is a good act. That what Sarah brought was superior to what they had.
And it's not just what I'm getting at, and where I think my thesis is certainly open to testing, but it's not merely multiculturalism run amok. Not merely that they had this perfect natural society that the Westerners came and ruined, but they really do hate the cross.
Yes.
They came and they brought the cross, and they brought Christianity, and something within these people wells up in disgust toward that.
So they have to say that the cross is the opposite, in fact, of what it is.
It is.
They have to say that it's tyranny when, in fact, it's the only route to freedom.
Yeah. I can recommend the best movie made this millennium, Apocalypto.
I agree.
We were just talking about that. I just saw it.
Can we talk about that on the other side?
We'll be right back. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is country music artist Colin Ray. Do what I do and keep it right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
Everybody's favorite Catholic outer space delivery pilots return for their greatest adventure yet in the brand new graphic novel Weapons of War. Fresh from saving the solar system in The Truth Is Out There and saving the timeline of salvation history in The Big Picture, Brendan and Irk land in a magnificent domed city on Mars for what is supposed to be a simple shuttle job. But soon they find themselves caught up in a sinister assault on faith and freedom. Will Mars be lost to the enemy? Brendan and Irk's only hope for the flight is in the power of God's sacramental gifts. A totally new kind of Catholic resource for apologetics and evangelization, The Truth Is Out There series combines the visual excitement and quirky humor of graphic novels with solid popular philosophy and theology. The result is a series in which everyone from teens to adults can find accessible answers to questions about God, the soul, true happiness, and much more. Order your copy of Weapons of War today by calling 844-239-4952, by visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team talks about what Mondays mean to Catholics.
Monday morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. We've got a special episode for you today for the celebration of Independence Day weekend. With us, President Chris Check, the president of Catholic Answers. We don't actually call him President Chris Check. I don't know why I said it that way. It's just Chris Check, president of Catholic Answers. And then
I shudder to think what I'm called around here. Yeah.
Nothing bad. No, you're not one of those like
mostly
ones
Your Highness.
Yeah. And then Todd Aglialaro, the director of publishing at Catholic Answers, who's on a win streak. Man, you should see some of the new books that are coming out from Catholic Answers. It is not just the usual dribble. He has really brought up his. No, I'm sorry, Todd. That was.
Thank you.
Wrong. No, really. But a lot of really good stuff coming out from Catholic Answers Press. You should check it out. I joke. I jest. But we're talking a bit about the spiritual crisis. We've gotten down to the nub of it. I think Todd has done a good job getting us down to the nub of it by pointing out that at root, the mania that is being experienced in our society, it's really a destructive mania, is a desire to displace God with ourselves, make ourselves. I don't know if make ourselves gods as much as just put ourselves in the divine position as the definers of reality, as the ones who are ultimately in control, and that manifests itself. I think the point you were making, Todd, unless I'm mistaken, that part of this tearing down, like the statues of the St. Patrick of California, that's what I call him, the St. Patrick of California.
That's good.
Father Junipero Serra, because I don't want to exclude my own people. Like, I have this Irish background. It's not like the Irish were always Catholic. Somebody has to bring the gospel to you. And it's a good thing when they bring the gospel. It's not an imposition of some exterior thing. It's the restoration of what's good and holy in every human being, and it's always a restoration. It's never, but it comes wrapped in many, often the complexities of human history and the violence that comes with that. It's all there. But what you were saying, I think, Todd, was that the tearing down and defacing of statues like those of the St. Patrick of California, Father Junipero Serra, has at its root really an attack on God.
Yeah, well, it's more than one thing. I don't mean to reduce it. And even in the French Revolution, it was where they cut the heads off countless statues, and you can walk through France and parts of Switzerland, maybe today, and see their handiwork still. So it's a severing of the present from the past in this act of reinvention. But there's a kind of malice there too, I think, and it manifests itself not just in that iconoclasm, but certainly in the violent oppression that we saw of the church in the French Revolution, and the maybe somewhat whiter kind of, as opposed to red, oppression that Christians and Catholics are experiencing today. But it's still there, and that's my theory. I think that there's and again back to the desire to make of ourselves gods, and you see it not just in transgenderism, the desire to identify one's sex, but yesterday's issue, it seems, but embryonic stem cell research. I always thought that was the perfect example of that principle at work, where we go back to the very origins of life and we attempt to capture it and manipulate it and use it to serve our own ends, of course, resulting in much death. So it's something that's been around and has a number of manifestations.
I think we can go from white to red more quickly than we might imagine. I mean, it certainly happened in Mexico within a century, and not so far away of right now, and in Spain, and it's happening in sub-Saharan Africa right now. So
right.
Can I just counter? I agree completely, and I might have not said that a year ago, because I have this still kind of
it can't happen
faith
here.
in the institutions kind of thing. We were talking about the Benedict option, and Rod Dreher, one of the cleverest things Dreher ever said was the law, which he calls the law of merited impossibility. And it's the principle that says that can never happen here, but when it does, you'll deserve it.
Yeah,
and we're seeing a kind of slippery slope with the amount of oppression that our supposedly free society is willing to tolerate of opposing viewpoints and people.
Right.
And it's worse in Canada, and it's worse in parts of Western Europe. And there's no reason why it can't come here.
It may, in fact, take some red martyrdom to stop the frenzy. We think of the Carmelites of Compiègne, novelized in Gertrude von Lefort's Song of the Scaffold, a wonderful little novel I recommend to all of our listeners. But it was when those nuns were finally led to the guillotine singing the Te Deum there that the people of France woke up. When Sarah,
well, you can go along. A lot of blood can be spilled before people wake up, though.
Oh, for sure.
You wouldn't be too
Yeah.
I don't know. I was going to say sanguine, but that's not the right word.
No.
But be careful about being too sanguine about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, from that blood, the watering the seeds of the faith, there's a story in the life of Sarah that takes place here in San Diego. He is not here at the time when there is a Cumier uprising, and Father Jaime is martyred. Sarah gets word of it. He's up north, maybe Ventura or Monterey. I'm not exactly sure where he is at the time, but he said when he hears the news of the martyrdom of his confrere, he says, and now we will begin to have conversions. So.
Yeah, I do want to point to you use the word institutions and your innate maybe desire at least to trust institutions. The French Revolution, you can often, the story of the French Revolution is told is that, this outlandish kind of selfishness of the aristocracy was summarized in "let them eat cake." Which
she did not say.
Which she didn't say, but the go to Versailles and you'll see that they weren't so far off about that, about the aristocracy.
Right. So there's that side of the French Revolution, but the side that is hidden that we don't talk about because it inconveniences our modern ideas is that there's a long period of the corruption of French institutions, of higher learning, of French philosophy, of a deep and really nurtured, cultivated anti-Catholicism among the academics of France that predates this. So there's two sides to this story. And it seems to me that at some point here in the United States, we have to be willing to go, you know what? Those institutions are actually corrupt. And among them have to be the institutions of mass communication, news media in particular, and institutions of higher education. They are grossly and broadly corrupt, and we still pretend like they're reputable institutions when they are not reputable or they may have a good reputation, but the reputation is fumes of a former time.
Cy, we do shows like this, and then listeners say, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, here's something Catholic families can do. Don't send your children to a college or university where they are going to be told lies that turn them away from Jesus Christ. And by the way, you're paying for the privilege. Stop doing that. There are fine Catholic colleges where they can get excellent classical education and be formed for a very successful life, if that's your concern. And they will not be told lies that will turn them against the cross.
Yeah, I think everything flows downstream. You mentioned media rightly and higher education rightly. I think probably education is at the head of the stream there.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And
what you said, public education or
higher education? Well,
higher education.
It's not just public. In fact, I would tack on to Chris's point, and he probably meant it implicitly, that when families are making these decisions about their kids, avoid those Catholic institutions too that have become enamored with and corrupted by worldly success and worldly ideals, and because they're in many ways more dangerous. You could go to a UC Berkeley, which is a public ivy here in California, and probably if you're well grounded as a young Catholic person, survive with your faith and get a good education. Because you kind of know what you're up against, and you can go in kind of with your fists clenched, ready to resist what they're going to try to do to you. You go to, and I won't mention any names, but you go to, and we could all think of some of these Catholic, many of them with sterling reputations,
Jesuit pedigrees,
yes, in different religious traditions that are just warmed over secularist in their approach. But your guard is down. When you're at them. If I had a nickel for every time I was told, not just with regard to colleges, but even secondary and elementary schools, but it was a Catholic school, I felt safe. My kids should have been safe there, or I didn't have any reason to doubt what my teacher or what the brother was teaching me. And so there's a sinister aspect there as well that we have to be on the watch for.
Yeah, it's basic lying in advertising for these institutions. They want to rope in the Catholic parent with an impression with a patina really of Catholicism, but it's not there. I would even go. So I've said this before, and I think any Catholic bishop who is not moved by the controversies and the crises in the Catholic Church of the last 25 years is a moron if you haven't learned some kind of lesson from that. And among the lessons are, you need to be paying attention to your institutions. If I'm a Catholic bishop, at some point, I want to personally have a conversation with every school principal in my diocese. I want to sit down with that principal and find out, do they believe the Catholic faith or not? Because one of the things that's corrupting the Catholic faith of children is that they're going to Catholic schools where the principal doesn't believe in the Catholic faith.
And so
and giving them a kind of quasi-Catholic faith, which is actually more destructive than if they'd just gone to a public school.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you have a principal like that at the helm, he or she is not hiring Catholic teachers, which is the one job of the principal, is to pick a good faculty.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just if you want to say, well, we neglected the priest scandals, we are currently neglecting the Catholic principal scandal. It's not.
That's good.
You're not imposing something, again, exterior on a Catholic school when you as a bishop say, I want to talk to every principal in this diocese, and if you don't hold the Catholic faith, we're going to help you find another job. We're going to send you to an institution where your talents are fitted appropriately, but they don't fit here. You'd be better off having a completely amateur principal who really believes the faith than having a principal with 2 PhDs who doesn't believe the faith. And well, there it is.
I think that the church has made a grave error now several generations ago with respect to this specifically, Cy, and that is by insisting that Catholic school faculty, parochial school faculty, be accredited by the state in which they are teaching. Because the state accreditation means that you have endured courses in the latest fads, educational fads, as Chesterton says, that are younger than the children they are imposed on. And so they've endured training in these fads of the diabolical descendants of John Dewey or whatever it is, and know nothing about the subject matter that they are teaching, whether it's history or literature or poetry or whatever it is, but have learned all of this, or been indoctrinated in all of these methods. And when one bishop in this country says, I am going to do what you've just said, Cy, and evaluate my faculty based on their love of Jesus Christ, their love of students, and their knowledge of the subject matter, and their talent for teaching. And that's it. I don't care. In fact, I'm not looking for people that the state of Nebraska or Iowa or California,
or for God forbid, California,
precisely, has given its approval to.
Well, this starts with the market for these schools, though. So it starts with us. It starts with Catholic parents, and as long as there are Catholic parents who have a lot of money, who want their kids' degrees or the school that's listed after their name to be one that checks all those boxes, and this goes all the way up through college. There's a reason why the most expensive, elite, well-regarded in worldly circles Catholic universities are the ones that have kind of made a deal with the devil in this way, and they're the ones least to be trusted. But they're able to do it because we feed the engine by desiring that ourselves.
It's true. Right. And there are alternatives, but sometimes they're very hard to find. And especially, I think, at the primary and secondary level. Sure. When it comes to the college decision, if someone has gotten that far, then I think he or she can find a good classical Catholic school to go to. Or such a program within a larger school, like the Catholic Studies program that my kids went to at St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. But at the primary level and at the secondary level, parents are at the mercy of the local prelate in the decisions that he has made. And, God bless Bishop Barron for recently calling on the laity to step up, with the call of Vatican II. But the laity aren't the ones hiring the faculty of these schools. The bishops are.
Well, if we want to talk about positives, I think, Chris, you and I both...
Who said that? Who said we wanted to talk about...
at the end of the first hour, I thought we said that. It seems like, at least anecdotally, that there is a kind of resurgence of independent Catholic schools founded on classical educational principles and orthodoxy.
A shout out to our friend Tony Bees up the road with St. Joseph's Academy.
St. Joseph's Academy is a great example of that.
And then my friends, St. Martin's Academy and St. Gregory the Great Academy in Fort Scott, Kansas.
But you know what those people are showing? It's not impossible in the current environment to just provide a good, healthy Catholic education. It's not impossible.
It's such places.
You just have to be committed to it. You have to be committed to do it. I got to take a break. I'm sorry. I got to take a break.
I have so many more good things to say.
Yeah,
though,
me
sorry.
too. I'll just say
keep saying them during
the break.
We'll just turn the microphones back on after the break, right after this.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title of the Angelic Doctor.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Thomas Aquinas wrote a basic textbook for young theology students that became the Church's most famous guide to the faith, the Summa Theologica. It helped him earn the title Doctor of the Church. He died in 1274.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Our countries, our society is in a state of crisis, facing several real troubles, and we decided to take this time the day before Independence Day here in the United States to talk about the crisis that we're facing. And I do think probably for our listeners around the world, the problems are the same. I mean, if you're in Australia, they're the same. They're just worse because you're Australians and you're no, that's not, I don't want to insult it, but basic problems essentially the same if you're listening in Great Britain, although they'll have a different feeling if you're listening in even I just yesterday a caller from Nicaragua. Probably not that much different in Nicaragua. Just the extreme ends of it will be different. We're all facing this. Well, I suppose a battle over what it is to be a human being, what it is to be a human society, who God is, and does God have any place in what we're doing, or is there any reason that we should involve ourselves in what God is doing as societies? All these questions are everywhere, in part because mass media has covered the earth, and so really everyone's got the same Twitter feed, and so it's the same 8 people bothering us all on Twitter. All right, I think and they're doing a great job. But I wanted to end with actually to ask you two for some advice, because I am feeling, I'm going to be really brutally honest here. I listen to Catholic radio and I watch Catholic TV. And I am looking at the next several months of political discord in the United States, and I'm thinking that is going to poison our conversation in Catholic media, because I don't see the hosts in Catholic media always being disciplined enough to stay on message. I think sometimes we decide what we need to do is speak up for a particular political position, and that we have some moral obligation to do that, where I think we have a moral obligation not to do that. So I wanted to get your advice. If you're the host of a Catholic radio program, and you know one, so this is advice that will be applied. How would you deal with the coming summer and fall of discontent here in America? How would you address political issues? And would you agree with me that I have a basic allergy to it? I would prefer, and I wrote this in a recent letter to the radio club, I'd prefer to do a show between now and November in which not a single political question is answered. I don't want to do it. And I got some notes back from people saying you're a coward and you need to get with the program. Our republic is on the line. You need to be defending this great American experiment or whatever. So with all that thrown out to you, go ahead and advise a Catholic radio host, an anonymous Catholic radio host, how to deal with politics over the next 5 months.
Well, I would say two things. First, I think it's an entirely healthy instinct to want to retreat from that. When everything is over politicized, it can be a good thing to lean extra hard in the other direction, even if that's not the mean, but just to provide some balance. And it's just a healthy way to live. That said, when we have a duty to talk about issues, when you got a duty to your listeners, and we've got a duty to apply Catholic principles to these temporal questions, my one piece of advice, if you could call it that, is to bear in mind and perhaps help elucidate for people the freedoms that we have. Chris said something earlier that I hear a lot and I don't really agree with, but I understand the thought. And he says that I tell people that my politics is that I'm Catholic, and I think he means more than this. But there is a temptation in some people's minds to do an end run around political labels simply by acting as if Catholicism were a political platform. But it's not. Certainly there are principles we must adhere, and sometimes those principles terminate in policy matters that are no-go zones for us. We can't, as Catholics, support the killing of unborn children in the womb. We can't support laws that promote it. We can't fund it, et cetera, et cetera. But there are many, many areas where we have freedom, and there are principles that, when we apply them pragmatically, leave us with reasonable disagreements among reasonable people. And I think it's important when we get to that stage to remember we are arguing on the level of pragmatism, and we're not trying to figure out who's the most Catholic in that opinion.
Cy, if I were the host of the greatest Catholic radio show in the history of mankind, then I would see that
You're talking to Dr. David Andrews right now?
I am not. I know my friends on Look, it's all friendly, right? EWTN, sure. Yeah. You do find yourself, Cy, in a position of leadership, and it is, and I am very glad that you're in it. Because I think that I know that you have the perspective, and that is a word that gets thrown around, but the perspective that begins with a profound love of Jesus Christ, and it's evident in the way you treat each caller who calls into the show, and your desire to leave them closer to Jesus than when they called. So if your peace is upset, and our Lord does not want our peace to be upset. He does not want this. He says as much, right? I give you peace, and not and not as the world gives it, right? So if your peace is upset, then it's going to be difficult for you to fulfill that calling that you are so beautifully fulfilling. So my counsel to you is to limit your intake of the noise, to be informed, and I agree with Todd. You cannot avoid these things. And by the way, our listeners expect it because they want they want the crises of our age interpreted through the lens of all Catholic thought from the beginning. So you have an obligation to bring this to them, but not to have your peace disturbed. So it's going to require on your part a little bit of a measure, how deeply you dive into this, but then also for the peace of our own listeners. I just go back to that Peggy quote from the first hour, Piggy, where he says, nothing is as old as today's newspaper. Nothing is as new as Homer. There's a very rich tradition. And if it's true, it belongs to the Catholic Church. And we have so much to share over this program. And you are the conduit for sharing all those things. So I don't know if that's a counsel or a pep talk, but you're doing great.
I think a little bit of both. I appreciate it. I suppose the at the root of it is we need to be united in Christ. There is no other way really to have to be united. I mean, there are trivial ways, but and I have a great fear that we are just dividing up into camps, even within the Catholic Church, and I don't believe that's what the Lord wants. So,
You're not, sorry. You're not.
No, right.
All right. Thank you. That's Todd Aglialaro. He's the director of publishing at Catholic Answers Press with a whole bunch of great new books. And I believe he's got this fall coming out what will be his triumph, a book that will be his triumph. Is that right, Todd?
It's all in the author's hands.
And then the president of Catholic Answers, Chris Jack. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Cy.
And I believe you both join me in saying God bless America. I think
Amen.
it's all
Amen
right to say God bless America.
Take it
I
away,
don't think
Chris.
we're going to sing it. No.
From the mountains.
Here we go. All right. Go ahead. It's a solo, man. This is not a chorus.
God bless America.
All right. God bless America.